U.S. deployment in Israel, China flexing, private nukes. Those stories and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Well, I have just one little announcement on tomorrow. So you have to be listening to this live or right away. Tomorrow, Wednesday, October 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a private Q&A Zoom call with Hervoye Morich and Parallel Mike, and that is open to all premium subscribers. And I am telling you now because you could either subscribe on Apple to just click the premium for the feed, or I just started a Substack, which I'm starting to populate with stuff, starting to post on it. I'm giving a 90-day free trial. I think there might be a 30-day free trial still up on the Apple as well. So if you want to sign up for that, go ahead and sign up for it and then email me at monicaperezshow@gmail.com from or with the same email address that you signed up for and the premium, and I'll send you the Zoom link. So I like to keep it small. That's why I don't just blast it out there. I want to, well, I think we probably have to keep it small. But anyway, right now, any premium subscriber can have access to that Zoom if you just email me at monicaperezshow@gmail.com. So let us start talking about the news of the day. Their big headline: China holds war games encircling Taiwan in warning to island's leader. Scores of Chinese aircraft and dozens of ships surrounded Taiwan after President Lai Ching-te rejected Beijing's claim over the island. I think they are saying it's Lai, L-A-I, Lai. Ching, I think T-E is duh, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So what they did, I actually saw some of the videos. I saw like diagrams of the videos. So I don't know how of the actual action. So I don't know how tremendous a force it was, but it did look like there were ships circling Taiwan and there was aircraft. They said it was basically unprecedented. China said that the speech that the president of Taiwan gave on Taiwan National Day, like they don't call it Independence Day because that would be provocative, but he said it was actually felt supportive of independence and was provocative. So let's just get a look at how how scary, how provocative the Taiwanese were. They had a parade that day. They showed their military force. Let's take a look at it. Ooh, scary. That I actually wanna hug them so much. They're like little blow up Legos, and in this Taiwan National Parade, they had, so for people who are just listening, they're like little GI Army guys, but they look like inflatable Legos, and there's little Navy guys and little Air Force guys. So I would not feel super provoked by those little guys. I kind of more feel like tickling them, but I guess China didn't like it. But in reality, we've been talking about how the West, and I'm going to count Taiwan, their allies, the West, have been provoking China. We talked about last week or the week before how, so many countries were, Japan was going through, New Zealand, Australia, France, Canada, the UK, the US was going through the Straits of Taiwan, which China doesn't like. Now, Taiwan has absolutely every right to self-governance. There's 23 million people there. It's more than twice as many people who live in Cuba. So it's a legit country-sized country. And the bottom line is you really have the right to self-governance anywhere, even by the law of nations, Vattel's law of nations, not even just by my hyper libertarian perspective. So back for hundreds of years, the founding of this country definitely supports the right for people to self-govern. And Taiwan you don't even have to do a revolution. They just have to assert their independence. China doesn't want them to get anywhere near that. And they're saying that they were provoked by this National Day stuff, but likely they had this military exercise already planned. Taiwan says, "Oh, you're being ridiculous. We're not being provocative at all." Well, they might not be, but their allies certainly are. Also, so I recognize that China just thinks it's part of China. They think Tibet is part of China too, if I recall correctly. But Taiwan has that semiconductor company there that builds those super super high end AI chips, and we know that that's the most important thing in the world right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is really what's at stake or in play. And I was trying to, like, get a handle on this story, if it was a big deal or not. So I just I had to subscribe to the New York Times. I've never done that before. I feel like I just registered as a Democrat, you know? Like, it just doesn't feel right. I felt bad when I registered as a Republican and that was just to vote for Ron Paul in the primary. And I don't like subscribing to the Wall Street Journal either, but the New York Times, like, just goes too far. But they had a good deal, and I really need to flesh out. I was like, I think I need a little both silos. So of course I look at the two stories, and I don't think they're actually quoting the same people, but they're both quoting their guy on the ground. Their objective observer is from the Atlantic Council in both articles. So that goes to show you there are not actually two sides to any story anymore. But there were three stories about AI in today's journal, the print edition alone of today's Wall Street Journal. Three, at least three. And I mean, I think there might have been three just in the B section. So one of them was just about how AI needs to be better educated, better trained, better informed, and it needs like a little more tweaking than just trolling around databases, trying to figure stuff out on its own. That wasn't that interesting an article, but there was another article. It might not have actually been from today, but there's all this Nobel Prize talk these days because they just gave them out. Here's a headline: A godfather of AI just won a Nobel. He has been warning the machines could take over the world. Jeffrey Hinton hopes the prize will add credibility to his claims about the dangers of AI technology he pioneered. So Hinton is sharing the Nobel Prize in Physics with John Hopfield of Princeton. They have been working on neural networks since the 1980s, and that's what they won the prize for. They are based the information processing on the human brain. I always think of Data. Didn't Data have a neural net? Isn't that why Data kind of like could think like a human being? Like he could think, he didn't just have to have like information in there and like formulaic connections. It could like zip across and be organic. It says his work was the basis for many of the AI technologies in use today, from ChatGPT's human-like conversations to Google Photos' ability to recognize who is in every picture you take. Now, remember, generative AI, which does that kind of stuff, is not the same thing as artificial general intelligence, which I would say is what Data really is, and which supposedly isn't there yet. That we aren't really there yet. But don't forget, those Harris brothers on Joe Rogan said, we want to make sure that nobody in the public sphere or private enterprise or whatever ever gets anywhere near that. We want to kind of cap it at Chat GPT, and anything above that should be in the hands of the US military. These are Canadian guys saying the US military should control it, especially against China. Like, you don't want China to get it. And that anybody who tries to use it without a license should go to jail. Okay, so that would be what they want. They want AI to be highly regulated and controlled. This guy, the 76-year-old Hinton, resigned from Google last year so he could talk more about the possibility that AI systems could escape human control and influence elections or power dangerous robots. Like, his biggest fear is that it influence elections, because that's that thin line between us and tyranny. Like, thank God for these elections, you know? It's like that's what he's just this Nobel Prize winner feels like our elections have such integrity. It would be awful if something got a hold of it that wasn't a human being, you know? And the thing is, the human beings being in control of this stuff is the greater risk. It is the greater risk to centralize that in the control of human beings is the greater risk. The decentralized one, even if it went rogue, first of all, we don't have artificial general intelligence. So there is no, right now, we're not even talking about that. They want to control the whole thing. But my fear is that this thing will be controlled by the US government, the US military of all things. So I'm afraid it can do these things and not escape human control. And these kind of regulations, which he is in favor of regulating it to the hilt, that will absolutely corral it, cordon it off in the very hands of those I think are least trustworthy when it comes to this stuff. So he says Hinton's views have pitted him against factions of the AI community that believe dwelling on doomsday scenarios needlessly slows technological progress or distracts from more immediate harms, such as discrimination against minority groups. Because these guys who run the world, their biggest problem isn't that they make intelligent machines that can run the world. It's that minority groups will be discriminated against. Because the irony of that, which they clearly don't care about. Look at the welfare rolls in this country or the incarceration rates, both of which I think are slavery. And tell me that those which are run by these very people are not discriminating against minority groups. And whatever. I'm not going to get into it because that will just make me tweak. But this stuff's funny, in my opinion. It's definitely not the stuff that we really need to be worried about. What we really need to be worried about, in my opinion, is the next article. Google backs new nuclear plants to power AI. I mean, I bring you these articles when they come out in the newspaper. I've been talking about this every day because there's a new article about it every single day, and just in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, pretty much I could probably say at least every time I have a show since the last show, there's been numerous articles about AI in the journals. The subtitle is Startup Kairos Power Plans to Build Small Reactors to Help Supply Electricity to the Tech Company's Data Centers in a First of Its Kind Deal in the US. They say on their homepage, and I also stumbled upon, Kairos means the right or critical moment. It also means time, but the right or critical moment. So my first thought was there's a mini nuke plant company underway that's making deals with Google. Who on earth is funding that? Because and if you look at it, it's absolutely robust. There's a huge executive team. Obviously this thing is good to go. They're in testing and everything. And I'm thinking, if you and I wanted to start a nuclear power plant that literally churns out nuclear power plants, how much is that going to cost? $1 billion? What do you think why would you hesitate to do that? Because 30 years from now or 10 years from now, when you actually start turning out these machines, what will the regulatory environment be like? How do you know what those things will look like, what their impact will be, and whether or not the government or whomever will allow you to employ those? So what you would my first thought was like this has to be insider stuff. It has to be people who understand that they are not taking regulatory risk, because the risk would be enormous. And even if this thing is going to get done eventually. So like, I'm putting my $1 billion into this or 10 billion or whatever, because I know this is the future. Think of all the, Betamax or whatever. Think of all the times in the past that entrepreneurs put big bets on something who it was too soon, that the time was not ripe. Ironic that this is called the right or critical moment. It's actually called like the right time. It's not too soon. How do you know? How do you know it's going to happen? So of course I had to dig in and see. Yeah, it's supposed to be it says Google ordered 6 or 7 small nuclear reactors, SMR. It says SMR, but you'd think it would be SNR, from California's Kairos Power, with the first due to be completed by 2030 and the rest by 2035. Okay. Uh, so I actually had to do a time capped search. So I go to Google, which you cannot do on your phone anymore, but you go to Google and it's like anytime. So I put the time, I ended it whenever it was, 2022 or something, because this story has totally Google bombed Kairos. You cannot look up Kairos without this story about Google coming up. So I had to go back in time, and I think I might even have had to go into archive.org. It might not even still be up there, but it says the US. So because the guy who runs Kairos is like the co-founder and whatever, is a young guy who was a doctoral fellow or something when they plucked him out of academic irrelevance to run this company. All right, so it says the US Department of Energy has announced that Kairos Power, this was from I think 2020, or I think it's 2020, is a recipient of an Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program Award, an ARDP, for risk reduction funding. The total award value over the next 7 years is, care to guess? $629 million. So there you go. That's it. That's enough to get you. That's enough to allay the risk. And the fact that it's the Department of Energy that's on your side, obviously, they're giving you the go ahead. I mean, I always think that about Uber or Airbnb. These things they violate laws and regulations. Like, you couldn't just start renting your house out. Maybe you could, but certainly weren't allowed to start driving your car around and picking people up in New York or San Francisco. So it says this funding will support the development of Kairos Power's Hermes test reactor, which did feature in some of these stories. Kairos Power is partnering with the Electric Power Research Institute, which seems like some kind of think tank. It's a nonprofit. I mean, I didn't even get into that. I think enough said on that. It's also partnering with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Idaho National Laboratory, and Materion Corporation. Oak Ridge is federally funded. Idaho National Lab is a Fed thing. Materion is a publicly owned company, which the two biggest shareholders are BlackRock and Vanguard, which together own about a third of the company. Then State Street's in there too. I know that always feels like a smoking gun, but BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street own almost everything. And it's not really because they themselves own it. Like Larry Fink doesn't own it, or it's not for proprietary. I mean, when you start seeing venture capital firms and stuff like that, yes, that is those guys, that's a tight-knit group. But Vanguard and BlackRock and State Street, they run funds. So back in the day when there were pensions, I think they had even a bigger share of the market. But so I don't know if you can, I'm sure you can buy into funds like that with 401k. I don't know. I've never done that, but your retirement account or whatever would be there. So a lot of these funds are just everybody's money. I'm not saying these guys don't employ it with political ends in mind. That is definitely true. They are going to pick and choose what they want, how they want to shape the future. And that's exactly what they do. And they own so much of it that they can do it. But just looking at them and saying, well, BlackRock owns it, I don't think you can find a company today that has any significance that wouldn't have big, and I'm sure they glom onto the stuff that's like grossly subsidized by the federal government, and obviously has a way in advance green light that nobody else has, and may even have advanced warning. Probably their VCs are out there not only investing but scouting and to see, okay, when this thing goes public, like we need a foot in the door. All right. So, this annoyed me. The end goal here is 24/7 carbon-free energy, said Michael Terrell, Senior Director for Energy and Climate at Alphabet's Google. We feel like in order to meet goals around round-the-clock clean energy, you're going to need to have technologies that complement wind and solar and lithium-ion storage. And lithium-ion storage like that. See, this lithium-ion is not environmentally friendly, and neither is nuclear waste. I mean, at what carbon zero, at what cost? So I actually had to start looking into the carbon, and not to mention they're acting like they're investing in nukes because it's carbon neutral. They're investing in nukes because all of the energy in the entire world could not generate the kind of power AI is going to need. I really literally think it might be like a physics problem for the integrity of the Earth system. I mean, I probably have to do some homework on that. I should do a deep dive. But I did want to know, speaking of deep dive, where they put what the plan is for this nuclear waste. Like, how does Kairos know? I mean, and they're building factories to build nuclear power plants. This handful of them that Google is buying is not all of them. This is just the beginning. Gates is getting in on that. They all are. So the conclusion, I guess, from some random stuff I found, maybe The Guardian, is that deep geological disposal is considered the best bet. And I'm looking at this one method of deep geological waste disposal would last 100 years. One is said to last hundreds of thousands of years. Here's the problem, especially with the one that's only supposed to last 100 years. I talked to a plastic surgeon once, and I was just at a party talking to him, and he said the only thing he wouldn't let his wife do is get breast implants. And he said, because they don't last forever. And when you have to go in and get it out, you don't know if the host, her, is going to be healthy enough to have anesthesia, which is quite a risk with older people. There are two people in my family. My mother absolutely insisted got Alzheimer's or, lost their mental functions after anesthesia. I mean, it was actually true. And someone else who told me that, somebody else was in the chat said the same thing. So I understand completely why you would want to not set yourself up for needing anesthesia when you're old. Similarly, you don't know what's going to be the state of the world in 100 years, hundreds of thousands of years. I guess they talked about like markers, having to have satellites. Get this. This is the plan. One of the plans. Having a satellite in orbit that constantly beams down to Earth a warning about where the nuclear waste is for future generations. I mean, I don't think satellites can stay up there for hundreds of thousands of years. And I feel like in your heart of hearts, do you really think we're not going to have kind of end of times before that? Maybe not. Maybe this thing's going to go on forever. It's kind of hard to believe that. But so here are a couple of storage, deep geological disposal methods. Finland's Onkalo. Finland is the first country to implement a permanent solution for nuclear waste storage. The waste will be encased in cast iron and copper cylinders wrapped in bentonite clay and buried in bedrock more than 400 meters below the surface. I really want to understand the quantity of this stuff that they're talking about. I mean, how massive can it be? It's like I was saying about whale hunting. Whale hunting was fine until they just put like modern efficiency to it, and then it got crazy. I mean, if you're going to start churning these things out, I don't know. KBS 3, this method involves encasing spent nuclear fuel in cast iron, placing it in copper canisters, and surrounding it with clay and bedrock. Oh, okay. I guess it's the same method. And they say in the US and the UK, they're considering it. Finland's the first to do it. The other one here is dry cask storage. This method uses containers made of steel and concrete to store the waste. They last for a century or more. By the way, speaking of the whaling thing, we talked about the whale the true story of the whale ship Essex, which was what inspired the Moby Dick story. And if you read that book, all right, this is a spoiler alert. Spoiler. If you read that book, one of the boats, I think the only boat that actually made it back to tell the story, there was the captain, his, whatever, a couple of other guys, and his nephew, his sister's daughter. And I think Cotton was their name. They were dying. They were dying. They were thirsty and hungry. They were dying, and they had to decide who was going to give their life for the other guys to eat them. Because it's like, we all die together, or we can die one by one. Now, I personally might have thought, get the guys least likely to survive, or wait until like one guy dies first. But they didn't. They drew straws, and they absolutely swore that they had to accept the answer. And wouldn't you know it, the nephew got the short straw and gave his life, and it really stunk because then the rest of them survived. I think they got rescued like the next day. And he had to tell his sister what happened. Blah. But I heard on the news today, there was a boat, I don't know if it was a fishing boat or whatever. I think it was a fishing boat, saw like something floating in the water, pulled up to it and found an emaciated man who'd been in the water, Russian guy, who'd been in this boat or raft or whatever it was for, I think, 64 days. The guy's out in the open water for 64 days. And they said he had been out there whale watching, as it happened, with his brother and nephew. His brother and nephew were not in the boat. And we have yet to find out what happened. So, assuming that's a true story, I'm curious to know what happened. I just thought I'd tell you about that since we were just talking about it. All right. Here's the other one. Here's the other danged story. U.S. tech firms to invest more than $8 billion in UK data centers amid AI frenzy. 4 American companies are expanding overseas amid demand for artificial intelligence. I mean, I get it. Like, if it's going to make you more efficient to invest a tremendous amount of money in this stuff, okay. But I don't know. When they talk about sustainability and then they put the pedal to the metal on this kind of thing, which just doesn't seem necessary. So the UK government just announced that US companies, I think KKR, which is an investor, like that's more of a private investor, and the companies they own will build $8 billion worth of data centers in the UK. BlackRock announced last month they were going to do 10 billion of that kind of stuff in UK. Microsoft is putting 5 billion into the cloud in Italy. Amazon is pledging 19 billion. This is over like the next however many years to build out the cloud in Germany, 16 billion to build it out in Spain. So I'm thinking it's like around $50 billion. And I'm thinking, so TikTok is this massive national security risk here. But those people aren't worried about US companies building their clouds. Like, that's just data. I presume that the guy who has the data, has access to the data. And especially if it's an AI deal, I don't know how you cordon it off if you can, like, say, okay, this is my AI and this is my database. Or if when you use the cloud, they're allowed to just troll, they call it anonymously. I don't know, but I wouldn't trust them even if they were not allowed. I would not trust them to do it. And so that's a lot of information. That's basically all of the information. They say they're doing it to get ahead of it, to kind of corner the market on the data centers over there. I would be, if Europe wasn't already owned by the Anglo-American establishment, I would hope, I would expect them to push back, but it's probably too late for that. UK, I am a little bit surprised because I would have thought Rishi Sunak's Infosys or whatever would be in taking advantage of all this stuff. So maybe they are. Didn't dig any further into it than this article, but it always reminds me of Scientia est Potentia, science is power. That was the motto of total information awareness. If you don't know about total information awareness, look it up on Wiki. It's so crazy. 24/7 awareness of every single person on earth, facial recognition, gait recognition, where, if you walk out of one, shot spotter or whatever, they can hear your conversation in the next zone. And that was under George W. Bush. And of course, just like we were reading when we did our last chapter of mass control yesterday, they said as soon as you scrutinize it and say, this is, you're not allowed to do this, and they discontinued the operation, then it goes underground and then it just doesn't have a wiki page anymore. That one's still there. Oh my gosh. And the logo is so funny. It's a pyramid with an eyeball, and out of the on top, straight Illuminati stuff. And the eyeball shows a beam of light that's like enrobing an earth, a ball earth. And it just couldn't be creepier. So, here's something creepier. The U.S. is sending anti-missile systems to Israel to bolster their defense against Iran. That's the headline. Of course, they have an Iron Dome. They clearly repelled both attacks by Iran. This doesn't have anything to do with Iran, in my opinion. But what it does have to do with, and it's just one, they're sending a THAAD missile thing. Says the Biden administration is sending an advanced anti-missile system to Israel. They probably can't even use it because they have the dome. It's probably like a force field at this point. But he's sending it there along with American troops to operate it. So that is what I think is the most important thing. It says it's a THAAD-based interceptor designed to shoot down ballistic missiles, yada yada. It marks a significant step in American efforts to directly protect Israel against an enemy attack by putting U.S. soldiers on the ground. You know how many U.S. soldiers are necessary to run that thing? 100. Sounds like a lot, but that is not direct defense of Israel. To me, that is simply putting the boots on the ground to put them in harm's way for that tripwire effect, for when they can say, oh, American troops are in danger now, or God forbid, they kill some of them. So if one of these guys dies in an Iran attack or, an alleged Iran attack, then all of a sudden we've got war. This is a big problem. And today they also said we're threatening Israel with a suspension of military aid if they don't get more humanitarian aid into Gaza. And in my mind, the real threat is, and it's not a threat, it's an opportunity, another excuse. We're going to, if you don't get them aid, which they're definitely not going to, because we want to use it as an excuse to put more boots on the ground, and a lot. Like that's when they really have like a ground landing, in my opinion. So that's nerve-wracking, I would say. Netanyahu's like, we hear, America is telling Netanyahu what to do. Supposedly he's like, we hear you, but I'm for the people. I'm Israel first. And he lacks credibility, in my opinion. So I assume that at this point, it just looks like it's our plan to have this big war in the Middle East. Israel's like doing the dirty work, and boy, is it dirty. And Netanyahu seems to be very happy to do it, but it's really shaping up to be that bigger plan. So whoever's president next, and I feel like it's unlikely that Kamala is the one who's going to lead this war. Although Biden is obviously starting it, getting people in there. So Trump then, if one of these guys get killed and Trump says, well, now we'll show them. That kind of thing. I mean, I'm not talking about his personality. I'm talking about the character that he's playing. But there were Jewish-led protests on Wall Street demanding an arms embargo on Israel. It says stocks are rising while children are dying, said one member of the Jewish Voice for Peace. It is the largest progressive Jewish anti-Zionist organization in the world, and 500 American Jews and their supporters took part in the demonstration on Monday, making it the largest act of civil disobedience ever at the New York Stock Exchange, for what that's worth. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find out what's actually happening in Israel, if they're still protesting. Netanyahu was facing many protests. He wanted to redo the judiciary. Mexico is redoing its judiciary. That's probably going to spread. I'm sure separation of powers, checks and balances are all things that are in the crosshairs, along with, any remnant of classical liberal government. Okay, so let's I got a couple of more stories, but let's do the some comments first. Hello. Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness. The chat is robust. Oh, liked and shared. Thank you, Harry. If everyone would please like and share. And I have to tell you this. I would like to I put a lot of effort into this and I find like you might as well leverage it. So if you know anybody who would like to the show, please share the show. A big thing that pushes the show up in the iTunes search engine is reviews and stars, of course. So I'd like to get up to 500 reviews there. I think I'm like at 250 right now. So let's try to double it in the next year. And that would be great. So I would appreciate that. The Freedom Conversation podcast. Hi. I AI will never be self-aware. People just don't think deeply enough to realize this, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. Should we start? Quest Fanning says we should start. Well, uh, I would ask, should we? I can look at the Rumble comments. If we want to start commenting elsewhere, maybe reduce our dependence on YouTube. It's easy for me here because it comes right up on the stream. Yeah, I don't answer the Rumble comments. That's why there aren't too many. Jack Burton, imagine AI sitting around worried about election results. I know. Exactly. If it's got the power to control the world, it doesn't care about the elections. Ah, okay. You know what I'm saying? Yes. I mean, if they don't, even if the wrong person gets in, I'm sure you can figure out how to control it if you know everything there is to know in the world. Sub AI for surveillance data center and voila. Oh yeah, who produces the nuclear reactors for subs? I mean, my vision is these yeah, it's maybe they're working on Iron Man, or whatever, like a nuclear pack so small that they can be mobile. And I mean, it's just weird. Utah State has the first one already built. I did not know that. Yes, we talked about this, that Microsoft is restarting the nuclear reactor at, I thought it was 3 Mile Island. Is it Indian Point? In any case, where oh, yeah, I guess it is Indian Point. They just don't seem to have to go through years of regulatory approval. Not to mention, there's a lot of federal money for decommissioning those plants. I wonder if they're sucking it up to recommission it. Would not be surprised. James says the only carbon they want at zero is us. Very clever. Oh, yes. Yes. Burnin' Beard says that's why Bill Gates is doing his molten salts. Yes, Kairos, their cooling mechanism, instead of open ocean water like Fukushima happening right now, check that out, is molten fluoride salts. That's what they're using to cool it. And they can reuse old fissile material. Interesting. This would be good. Burnin' Beard says Bill Gates has advocated for the development of new nuclear power plants that reuse waste uranium, as demonstrated by TerraPower's Natrium project in Wyoming. You would think that would be possible because obviously the problem with the waste is that it is throwing off radiation still. So, I mean, honestly, even yeah, like a degraded one, but you could still use the heat because all it is, all power, all power is heat, right? Heat, boiling water, I think. So, I mean, if it's hot, it's gonna boil water. Wow, any words, satellites don't exist. That is a hot sports opinion, because 'cause I've seen them. I mean, don't you see the stars that move a little bit too fast? Yes, I've heard that the real reason slavery ended is because yeah, it was just not efficient. I totally believe that. Oh, Vernon says the other part of the nuke thing is that old Prince Charlie, I like to call him Chucky 3, and the Windsors, not their real name, control most of the uranium in the world. Think about that with Charles' climate change views. Interesting. Oh, yeah, USS Liberty 2.0, maybe. You know who was instrumental in covering that up is John McCain's father. Uh, all right, I'm gonna have to. Oh yeah, this is the last one. Quest says since the scare of Fukushima, the Germans closed all their nuclear plants. I remember that. Since then, they experienced 35,000 more respiratory deaths a year. I don't know about that, but it's really a tragic inefficiency, and that's why when they say we're going to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, they're saying their power plant. They have a power plant. I mean, these people are sick. Now they're saying they're not. They're like, we won't bomb the oil or the nuclear facility. We're going to do something else. We're not telling you what it is. I'm like, okay, hospitals, schools, what the hell? Yikesy, yikesy, yikesy. All right, so I have this one. I have two quick hits. Give you my two quick hits. One is, oh, I read this article. Headline Trump. Well, I read the article, but Trump pledges to end double taxation of Americans abroad. The idea is the latest from the GOP nominee that goes beyond extending the 2017 tax law. This just pissed me off so much because salt not deducting. I live in California. The state taxes are so crazy high, and the sales taxes are crazy high. And you cannot deduct them from the federal taxes. So your federal taxes are whatever, 30, 40%. And then your state and local taxes are like 20%. I mean, you regular people cannot keep half of and the social security and everything, half. You don't even get as much as they take. So if and they want California and New York, they want these big welfare programs. So the red states, they got it into their minds because Trump told them that, yeah, it's like, why should the blue states get to deduct their state and local from federal taxes and pay less federal taxes? Look, they're going to have their welfare. And if you don't let the state and local tax be deducted from your income when you pay federal taxes, because it's money that you are not keeping and you're paying taxes on it, it's like a cap. There's just only so much you could do. They can't get it up to the level that they want. So they'll just push those welfare programs onto the federal level. And that worries me. But the whole thing's a crime against math. And he's worried about the double taxation with foreigners. That is tax deductible against itself. It's really messed up. That like really bums me out. It's probably didn't make any sense because it's so wrong. I mean, I just remember learning in school and in accounting. And when I got my all my finance credentials, like you don't do double taxation. Like people, you just don't do it. Anyway. Sorry. It's just discourages the most efficient people from working. All right. Oh, but here was a weird little thing. TD Bank, Toronto Dominion, pleads guilty and pays $3 billion to settle a money laundering case. The penalty was the largest ever imposed by U.S. officials on a bank for violating anti-money laundering laws, and regulators imposed a cap on their ability to accept new deposits. So I guess it really said that for the most part, they just didn't have controls over their system, and because of that, bad stuff happened. Canadian bank made it convenient for criminals to open accounts and transfer funds for nearly a decade. I mean, that kind of nebulous stuff means nothing to me. They are actually going after a dozen or two people for crimes. Now that, I mean, if you have actus reus, yeah, I can see that. But what they're doing is capping TD's growth, because they need to get their house in order before they start getting distracted with new business. And it just seems to me the U.S. banks, as a Canadian bank, the U.S. banks will definitely benefit from one of their burgeoning competitors getting capped. Wells Fargo had the same thing happen to it, and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they are all up to no good. I have read many times bank after bank after bank getting caught doing business in the black markets, and I have to assume that it's because the black markets are so huge. It just makes up too much money. I mean, maybe they want to be fooled and they look at the wrong kind. The criminals themselves set up the accounts just to let the bank off the hook from full knowledge of what's going on. But they couldn't really walk away from the business is a possible reason why they're doing it, because it feels very, very risky. Oh yeah, this is why I found this interesting. It said last year, TD agreed to pay $1 billion plus to settle claims arising from a $7 billion Ponzi scheme involving Stanford Financial, a bank that collapsed in 2009. TD was accused of continuing to do business with Stanford despite obvious red flags about its operations and the fraudulent certificates of deposit Stanford sold to more than 20,000 customers. Yeah, so does that ring a bell to you? Those were the guys, Alan Stanford, who is next to Bernie Madoff. The two of them are the biggest fraudsters in U.S. history. Who knows who was really behind them? Who knows who was really behind Bernie Madoff? I guess people do know. I'm sure there's been work done on it, but it's harder and harder to dig out this stuff now. I find the searches just so hard now. But that was the guy who had a joint venture fund with the Bidens, with Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. No, none of these things ever mention that. If I were writing these articles, I'd be like, oh, you might recall this guy's name from the fact that our president is in bed with him, or was. Anywho, that's that. Okay. So here's what I wanted to play as a clip. I thought, there aren't a lot of these, but why don't we just go back and look at the Reagan assassination attempt just to see how fast these guys move and what they do. Now, granted, they were close to the car, whatever. Folks say, I've read and heard, that the Secret Service had to have been in on it. Apparently, John Hinckley, the shooter, was in the press pool, which is why you don't really see him, because he's with the guys who have the cameras and everything. And then they tackle him and you can't see him at all. So at no point do you ever see this guy on camera. So I guess it was him who did it. This mentally ill son of a good friend of George Bush, the vice president at the time. Anyway, he did go to some kind of mental facility and now lives with his mom. Oh, well, all is forgiven, which is just, unheard of. Anyway, so let's see what we got here. Let's watch it.
It's hard to understand, but they're
Dude, check it. March 30th, 1981. Is that like 2 months after he's inaugurated? 2 months? I mean, they weren't giving him very long.
There may be many people around the country who are just learning of the tremendous events of this day. It is now 5 minutes after 7 o'clock on the east coast of the United States. And for those of you who are at this point expecting to see our regular evening news broadcast, we will take a moment to review the events of this day. At approximately 2:30 this afternoon, President Reagan was coming out of the Washington Hilton Hotel after giving a speech to the Building Trades Council of the AFL-CIO. You will see the president come out very shortly now. This is slow motion tape of his exit from the hotel. He comes out, he waves to the crowd across the driveway. Reporters call out questions to him, as is their custom. You'll see him turn now and look toward the reporters. And now the shots. In just a second. The agent in front of the president in the blue suit is hit, falls to the ground. The president, although we didn't know it at the time, also was hit in the left side of his chest. The police, who are swarming all over one man now, are after a man who has been identified as John Warnock Hinckley. He will be arraigned later tonight. He is 25 years old, we understand now. Earlier we thought he was 22.
Yeah, I think there's a cop, and he did recover. Jim Brady, that was terrible, terrible what happened to him. And the Brady law and everything, he had probably nothing to do with that. I don't think he was compos mentis. I'm not sure. But he did later, he was kind of a vegetable forever, and he died. And it was ruled, his death and the autopsy was ruled a homicide 30-something years later. But you cannot be charged with homicide if the death occurs more, I think, than a year and a day after the but-for cause. And then the Secret Service guy went down, and Reagan went down. And they said he was closer to death than we were kind of thought.
Two men lying on the ground there. Well, now there is Agent McCarthy on the ground. Tim McCarthy, we are told.
Yeah, you see that? How many seconds was that? How many seconds was that? And he is gone. He is out of there.
That he is in good condition at the same hospital where the president is now in surgery. And our cameraman, Hank Brown, moves his camera back now once again to the melee as they move in, the police and the Secret Service agents, on the suspected assailant to subdue him and make sure that he can do no further damage.
Is that an
the
Uzi?
Camera will move. As I say, this is slow motion, but of course it all happened.
Is that an Uzi? Is that an automatic? Is he just mowing people down if necessary?
Within seconds after the shots rang out.
So we don't see that guy. I mean, I assume it was Hinckley, but we don't see him at all.
4 persons wounded, including the President of the United States. They're still struggling there with this man known as John Warnock Hinckley. He had somehow moved into an area that was reserved for the press, but he was not alone. We're told that there were other people there, other citizens. Now the man you see lying down there on the ground is Jim Brady, the president's press secretary, who was wounded in the head and is in critical condition. He, too, is undergoing surgery at George Washington Hospital. The other 2 persons who were hurt, the policeman from the District of Columbia, John Delahanty, is said to be in serious condition, and the agent, Tim McCarthy, is said to be in good condition.
So, yeah, I mean, I just feel like they just swarm and get rid of them. Just feel like that's a little not hyper reality. I feel like that's actual reality. And with that note, I'm going to try something new. Hopefully it works. A little outro trick here that StreamYard's showing me. So I might be back in a second. Otherwise, see you guys soon. Thanks for coming. Hold on. All right, let's see how it works.